Let's do this. Make sure my phone's off. All right, let's get to moving. Good morning, everyone. I will begin. Oh, good morning. What day is it? It's Thursday. I will begin by starting this Lake County Planning Commission hearing for November 14th, 2024, calling to order at 9:01 a.m. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Ruby, can we get verification of legal notice, please?
Yes, there was actually nothing to be noticed.
That makes it simple. Thank you. Moving on, we are looking for any discussion or motion to approve the minutes from October 24th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting.
If there's no further discussion, I would like to approve the minutes from October 24th, 2024.
Okay, motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next, we will get into our citizens' input. This is an opportunity for anyone in the public wishing to speak on any topic that is not included in the agenda today. Okay. Any hands in the Zoom room, Ruby? Okay. We'll leave it open for just a minute. And we'll officially close public input, and we will bring up our first timed item at 9:05.
Thank you. Oh, is this working? Yep. Good morning, Commission. Michelle Iris, Principal Planner. I have Mary Claiborne, Senior Planner with me, and of course, Director Turner as well. We're here to provide an informational update on the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force recommendations thus far and the work that they've done beginning in 2022 when the task force was first created by the board to update our existing cannabis regulations currently in Article 27. So in your pack, oh, go ahead.
Just a second.
We have just a couple minutes until 9:05.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Thanks for that warm-up.
I was excited.
I know. I thought you were giving us a little prelude. I was like, okay, cool, a little history, kill the silence. We will check back in about 2 minutes. All right, we are showing a time now of 9:05. And as Michelle had mentioned, this is an informational update on Cannabis Ordinance Task Force recommendations. Good morning again.
Thank you. I'll skip the intro I already did preemptively. Thank you. So as I was saying, the Cannabis Task Force began meeting in August of 2022 to go through our existing cannabis regulations in Article 27 and update them, streamline them, make them more consistent with state regulations. We also have been identifying issues or areas where we could update the ordinance just based on our experience with permitting cannabis projects over the last few years. Excuse me. So in your packet, you'll see Table 1 includes a list of recommendations to date. Task Force is still going through a number of recommendations that are included in Table 2. So for the rest of the calendar year, they are meeting weekly instead of biweekly for 3 hours instead of 2 hours to try to get through some of these issues. The intent or the hope was to get all the way through that list and Planning Commission as well as Board of Supervisors by the end of the calendar year. Today, as mentioned, we're doing an informational update and then we'll continue meeting with them and bring it to the board as an informational or potentially in concept, is that correct? By the end of the year is the goal. So beginning on Table 1, I was planning to just sort of give a high-level summary of these items if that's amendable to the commission, and then, of course, jump in at any time if you have questions about specific items here on the list.
I think that's a great way to go about it.
Okay, great. So the first thing on Table 1 is the permit types, and essentially that's the list of tables we have in the zoning regulations stating what license type requires what type of permit, whether that's a minor use permit, a major use permit, or allowed by right. So the list of recommendations came to the Planning Commission last year of those permit types and also went on to the board for their input. Those are actually summarized in Attachment 1, so we'll have to flip back for a moment. And this table includes the list of recommendations from Task Force, what the Planning Commission noted and recommended, and then as well as the board recommendation. I'll just highlight, I won't read these line by line since you have seen these before, but the changes that the board made included for Type 9 retail, they wanted to remove C1 because they were concerned about having certain types of storefronts and didn't want them boarded up because those are for delivery only. For Type 10 retail storefront and on-site consumption, they wanted to change it to a minor use permit instead of a major for C1 and C2. Moving right along here, for processor license, they added PDC, that's our, with a use permit. And for Type 10 retail storefront, they changed C1 and C2 to a minor use permit instead of a major use permit. And those are the changes that they made to that table there. So did anybody have any questions about that, or should I keep moving along? Okay. And those still have to be adopted and formally, codified in our ordinance too, but those are the recommendations to date. So moving along, flipping back to the first table in the staff report, there also is, I should take a moment to step back and say that at first, Task Force was going sort of line by line through the ordinance and the regulations. So you'll see some of that, like the second one, general requirements, they chose to leave the language as is. And so that was the approach for the first couple of years. We realized that may not be the best use of everyone's time and trying to move things forward. So we then narrowed it down with that list of special meetings that we're doing for staff suggested items to discuss, as well as COTF task force items and public items that folks have identified. So you'll see that change in the approach here. So moving along to state license requirements, a lot of it is just sort of text cleanups. You'll see on the first couple of pages here for applicant, state regulations, property owner approval. We did add in here, the suggestion is to add written approval shall be renewed annually for property owners. A big one of discussion was background checks. Currently, the language notes that all applicants and employees shall undergo background checks, and the recommendation you'll see in the underlined text is specified to full-time and part-time employees, excluding licensed third-party contractors. A lot of folks use farm labor contractors, and it's sort of hard to manage that list, and sometimes they can get them at a later notice, and so it's hard for those folks to get all the way through the background process in time to be able to use those employees for their cultivation. Moving right along here, I'm just going down, I'm on page 6 now, qualifications for minor and major use permit. That's another one. There was some discussion about applicant or permittee and the difference of those terms and what that means for the license type. So there's some cleanups recommended there. I'm on page 7 under activity records. This is another minor one. Minor in some regard, major in another regard. The state requires that folks keep records of their tags and where they're transporting and moving their product for 7 years. And previously, what we currently have is they have to keep all of the hard copies of those tags, and it can be a storage issue, especially as you're getting into more and more years of being in operation. So we're trying to align that for 7 years, and one of the items that they'll be discussing at one of the next meetings for task force is whether or not that can be electronic through the metric system. That gets into the next one, which is track and trace. There's just a minor suggestion there. Weights and measures, leave language as is. Compliance monitoring. There's a couple, I'm on page 10 of the staff report. I skipped a page, pardon me, page 9 of the staff report. This one is a bigger change that's suggested. Currently, we have annual monitoring for all of our permittees. And the suggested language on page 9 at the top there notes that if there are no violations for the first 5 years of annual inspections, then annual inspections may be reduced by the director to every other year. So that's to, as you know, we currently have, I believe, 157, is that correct? About 157 permitted sites, and it takes a substantial amount of staff resources and time to go monitor each of those. It's been really beneficial to do that, but for our sort of our really good actors that consistently are compliant every year, that's an opportunity, if approved, for those folks to go to every other year. There's some discussion and suggested language in our annual reports section. Currently, the language in the code describes that annual reports need to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, and that's something that we haven't been able to do consistently. We've talked about doing it in batches. I believe that's happened at least once in the past. But this language here suggests that the Planning Commission could delegate that to the director and or their designee and do like an internal type of review of those and then bring them forward as needed, or if there are ones that are proposed for revocation, for example, or that have violations. Did you want to add anything to that?
Nope. Okay. It's a systems efficiency thing. I don't think y'all want to have 157 annual reports before you.
Yeah.
And for the most part, our site visits are not noteworthy. The permittees are doing a lot of work to comply with their conditions. We may see a little thing here, a little thing there that just needs fixing, but we differentiate. When we do find issues, we differentiate between the permittees who had, okay, that was a whoops, let's fix that and get back in line, versus the, okay, this is rather blatant. I think you know what you're doing, and it's not according to the conditions. And so we take a closer look at those for possible revocation. That's consistent with the board's direction to support and work with the permittees in good standing and zero tolerance for the ones who are just, kind of hiding through the permit to do their own illicit activities. So, yeah.
And then Sam just noted that the video is not broadcasting on Granicus. Do we need to take a minute for that?
Would you like us to take a moment? Yeah, let's take a quick break, please.
Okay, we will, time now is 9:15. Due to some technical errors, we will take a break and resume at 9:18. Time now is 9:18. Welcome back. Thank you for your patience. We had an internal glitch with our streaming on Granicus. If you are looking to go back and see what was previously stated, you're welcome to go to PEG TV, our YouTube stream, or on Facebook as well. So we are all up and moving and running live. So I apologize for the interruption. And Michelle, if you wanted to continue, I believe we're on page 12.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, and we're also going to stream, we're going to share screen on the tables that we're talking about. Are we able to pull up a PDF of that? There we go.
Yep, here we are. So this is the table that I have been summarizing.
Okay.
We're at the bottom of page 11. Let me get there. The one day I didn't bring my glasses.
There, you're on the line. All right.
So identification of emergency contacts and complaint records, some of those just have minor changes that are here in the table. I won't get into detail on those, but moving into prohibited activities at the end of 11, this section has a bunch of sections that are definitely of interest to the task force, the public, and staff. So I'll go into a little more detail on these. The first one is tree removal. You can see on the first column there, that's the existing language that we have, and then the recommended language is in that third column. So what the task force recommended is that removal of any commercial tree species that are particularly to the oak species that we all know are very important to our ecosystem. unless otherwise specified by a countywide tree removal ordinance. And the reason why we added that language is currently we don't have like a 3-to-1 mitigation measure, for example, which we commonly use and see in our permits and our CEQA analyses. And the hope is that through the general plan update and some of these other efforts that we're doing countywide, that we will develop a tree ordinance and a mitigation plan, particularly for oak trees and any other species of special concern to the county. So this was a way that the task force thought it could be amendable to just allow for flexibility as those ordinance changes instead of having to update the language each time it changes. Moving on to water use, the prohibited activities section talks about not allowing permitted sites to use illegally diverted water from any lake, spring, wetland, vernal pool, et cetera, and shall not be connected to public water. So the task force recommended changing the title to diversion of water as a more fitting title. And then that's just for that section itself, and there's a lot more recommendations, or requirements, I should say, within the stormwater and water use sections within the property management plan that's outlined as noted there on page 136 of Article 27. So it's sort of an administrative change there to that section itself. Getting into odor, as we know, that's an issue that comes up often with cannabis permits. Let me make sure I'm scrolling down. I just realized here. I'll leave Mary to scroll so I don't forget there.
Yeah, you're right there.
Currently, the language says cannabis-related permits shall not propagate objectionable odors, which cause injury, detriment, nuisance, and annoyance to a considerable number of persons. And then it goes on. I won't read every word of that. So we had a lot of discussion about odor and how to measure it and how that's, can be really challenging, and how some folks believe it's subjective and everyone has a different measure of odor, and particularly cannabis itself. Some people like the odor, some people don't, some people are allergic or have health issues that have been, stated. So we went back and forth a lot on that, and you can see the red line version here, or it's in strike through, trying to make that a little bit more enforceable through the property management plan, because in their property management plans, they're required to address odor, and at the state as well, particularly for mixed light and indoor. For outdoor, we had discussions on really the main thing that you can do is, increase setbacks, or by different zoning types and site layout and different things of that nature is the best way to mitigate odor, in addition to potentially planting different flowery or aromatic species. So I just want to note that, as you can imagine, we had a lot of discussion about odor. We spent a few meetings on that one, and this is where they landed with the suggested language as of now. The next one is electrical generators. As you know, that comes up a lot as well for our permitted sites. The current language says indoor mixed light cultivation of cannabis shall not rely on personal gasoline, diesel generators as the primary source of power, and that it shall only be allowed for temporary use in the event of power outages that are beyond the permittee's control. That's, talking about like a PSPS or something of that nature. So the recommendations are in a bullet point format and include applying that to all cultivation, not just indoor and mixed light, adding requirements for the stationary storage systems for the fire code to address any concerns related to fire hazards, moving just that section to prohibited or restricted uses, and then also differentiating between an unanticipated emergency use and then our folks that are waiting for PG&E permanent power sources. As you know, when PG&E won't establish a new power source until after the use permit is approved, and sometimes that can take, as I understand, up to a couple of years. Mm-hmm. So differentiating between that and the code we felt would be really helpful. Moving into lights, we wanted to amend the language, or the task force suggested amending the language to clarify that it'll be downward facing, restricted to the parcel, not spilling over onto any other parcel, and dark sky compliant. So we'll be drafting language for that moving forward. And then getting into pesticides, this was another one that was a pretty interesting discussion. So one of our cannabis task force members is the ag commissioner, and had some really good feedback about what is a pesticide. It's often not what people may think or that we hear from the public or permittees of what they consider a pesticide. So task force suggested adding that definition in both Article 27, or it will be Article 73, and also our definitions in Article 68. And then also just clarifying that an operator ID and applicator certificates required. And then there's just some notes about where to stick that language in the ordinance. Then we got into protection of minors. Currently, it says no permittee shall sell, transfer, or give cannabis products to persons under 21 years of age, and that they're not allowed within the cultivation area. As you know, we have specific definitions for cultivation area and permitted premises, and we wanted to make this more aligned with state requirements. So there is some suggested language there, changing the cultivation area to permitted premises. And I just also added the definition currently in 68 down at the bottom here for what that premises is defined as. So it's any structure or structures and land specified, owned, leased, or otherwise held under control by the permittee where cannabis activity will be conducted. So it's a broader definition than the cultivation area, which is the fenced portion only. So there was a lot of discussion going back and forth about that as well. And then we got into cultivation exclusion areas, and this is where the task force has left off. As you can see, there are several different exclusion areas noted here. Community growth boundary, SOS combining public lands, sphere of influences, public or private schools, developed public parks, drug or alcohol rehabilitation, licensed child care facilities or youth-oriented facilities. And it also notes that the distance shall be specified, measured horizontally, spatially, I should say, to the cannabis cultivation site. So that's another clarification I wanted to make that's currently in the ordinance. So what the task force has gotten through thus far is they're suggesting recognizing Clear Lake itself as public land, and then applying that setback to the 1,000-foot setback to cultivation areas. So anywhere along the shoreline is what that would look like. And we are continuing that discussion for some of these remaining exclusion areas at the next meeting, which is this Friday. And then they did also add language in the subsection K noted, just stating that if any of these setbacks are changed, that permits are sort of grandfathered in, if you will. And then Mary is going to go on to describe the list of items that are still remaining for task force, unless you all had any questions about anything that I went over.
I just have a wonderment about, in attachment A, there are a lot of reference to areas where you could do things and you couldn't do things. Is there some sort of a GIS overlay map to give us a sense of, is that going to be next to me, or is that down the road, or, do you have something that visual? I mean, I read this, but
Yeah.
I don't fully understand locations.
Yes, yeah, great question. We have, a GIS public portal. It's a parcel viewer, and it does have a zoning layer on it, as well as some other layers. I'm happy to send that out to you and anyone else that may need it. So you could turn that on and then see where the different zoning districts are that correlate to where these could be permitted or allowed.
Oh, good, because that'll help put context to
Yes.
this. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, if
absolutely.
you could send that out, that'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions for staff before we hand it over to Mary? No? All right.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mary Claiborne, Senior Planner. I'm going to pick up where Michelle left off for the remaining focus topics for the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force. Many of these items have been suggested by staff and also the task force in the amount of time that we've seen these approved projects and conducted annual inspections. Staff has noted a few things that we would like to have clarified and codified in order to make these efforts more enforceable. With that, I'll begin. Incomplete abandoned applications and voluntary withdrawal. The DCC, Department of Cannabis Control, has regulations for incomplete and abandoned applications that after a period of time, if we no longer hear from an applicant, we can close that project. At this time, we have had several projects that we have been unable to close due to the extended periods of time in which our applicants have kind of just backburnered their projects, if you will. So having this type of action makes this enforceable where we could actually close these projects out and not continue to reach out to the applicants year after year in hopes that something with the project will change. Additionally, we have the voluntary withdrawal option. With many business types, people can close their doors and decide not to do business any longer. That is not the case with commercial cannabis use permits. They have to expire after 2 years of inactivity or expire after the 10-year shelf life of the permit. So with that, we want to be able to add and incorporate the voluntary withdrawal effort so people can close these use permits by their own choosing. And with that, the recommendations that staff is going to bring forward to the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force is that this would have to be a notarized document from the original applicant to confirm that it is in fact being closed by the original applicant. Additionally, setbacks consistent with the Water Board. There was intent for a resolution to align with the State Water Board's setbacks for water courses. With that, the resolution went to the board. However, the ordinance did not follow through. So with that, we just want to align with what the original idea was to have our state regulations and our local regulations align more closely. An additional topic is operational hours. While Article 27 does specify delivery hours, it does not specify construction and operational hours for outdoor and mixed light cultivation and other non-delivery activities. So with this, we would like to have clarification that all of these hours are not the same hours. We want to have specification to each types of activity in which they're allowed to take place at the locations. Again, echoing Michelle's statement for records retention, staff has identified totes and totes of storage for these metric tags at some of the larger farms that are now requesting to bring in shipping containers for record retention. For that, we feel like we don't want to continue to add more things to a project for record retention when we could use the metric portal and have electronic versions available to us. And with that, we would need that codified as well. Another concern based on odor was increased setbacks for outdoor cultivation. As previously mentioned, odor affects people differently, and with that, we found that the size of the farm significantly affects the amount of odor that's being produced. So with that, for consideration by the task force is increased setbacks for the sizes of these proposed farms. During annual inspections, staff has identified RVs on commercial cannabis cultivation sites. At this time, RVs are a temporary use to a residential dwelling being constructed on site. And this is typically with a zoning permit for a temporary dwelling. And with that being said, a lot of these farms do not have intentions of constructing a primary dwelling because the purpose of this is agriculture in nature and not necessarily residential. So that is not currently an allowable use. One thing that we've found that may align with this type of use is a temporary construction office that is seasonal based on the need. And that's something that staff would like to bring forward to recognize, because while some folks may want to put in permanent structures at their sites, others may not. So with that being said, it is an item that's being brought forward to the Cannabis Task Force to consider. Another identified issue on site is farm labor contractor registration. So when staff conducts annual inspections, we do require live scan background checks for employees of the farm. But as previously stated, third-party subcontractors do not have to provide this information. However, they do have to be registered with our agricultural commissioner and with the state. So if we could have this codified where the farm labor contractor registration with our local ag commissioner is posted on site with the state license and other applicable documentation, we would be able to verify that it is in fact registered with our ag department and not a subcontractor that's not registered. As you all know, the notice of applicability date of October 31st, 2020 was set in place by Ordinance 3092, and with that, no new applications for commercial cannabis cultivation can be considered without enrollment with the state water boards by October 31st, 2020 or prior. With that, the task force is going to look at this ordinance and that date and see if that unofficial moratorium still applies. Additionally, there was a point in time when there was a significant amount of applications coming into the department, and to limit the number of commercial cannabis applications at one time, the board had imposed a 12 application per month rule. So with that, that's going to be identified as well to discuss if that's something that needs to stay in place also. An additional concern has been cannabis density of cultivation and retail sales in close proximity to each other. This is something where it could be, business-based. Is it affecting other businesses that are already established for new businesses to come in? Also, cumulative effects on larger projects that are placed in close proximity to each other. So that is something that is going to be considered by the task force. Another issue that has been identified by staff and specifically code enforcement is the number of plants that are at residential locations with primary caregiver, medicinal use, and adult personal use. So with that, code enforcement will come out and talk with these residents of the county, and they'll give them, so to speak, a magic number and say, well, I know the number that I can be under. But the question is to whether we can verify patient status to confirm whether they're actual patients or if they're adult use recreational growers who are kind of going in under the radar as a medicinal patient. And we can't request medicinal patient information due to HIPAA laws. So with that, what we can do is dig a little bit further, and the California Department of Public Health issues UUIDs. And this is similar to a DCC license number for commercial cannabis, but this is based on patient registration. It does not include any patient identifiers other than their name and their number, and that they are a verified patient. So with that, we would be able to determine actual patient status. The opt-out and reduced canopy process is something that CDD staff and the tax collector have worked on collectively for the past 3 years for a reduction of the cultivation taxes if a farmer is not cultivating their full square footage that they're permitted for. With that, CDD does send out notification 60 days and 30 days in advance of our June 1st deadline to receive our annual compliance monitoring fees and our performance reports. And with that, the June 1st deadline was sufficient for the tax collector to be able to have identified those sites that are reducing canopy and also opting out for the season. The state has a similar process in which they require this information by the spring. However, we give our cultivators a little bit more time so they can determine based on their plant orders and the license status that they have if they're going to be able to cultivate less than what they're permitted for, or opt out of cultivation activities for the year for the growing season. So with that, June 1st would be that date because it is CDD's hard deadline date to receive the performance report and our monitoring fees as well. Fallowing is something that was brought forward by the task force, which aligns with the opting out process. Fallowing is based on the Department of Cannabis Control's regulations to allow people at the state level to recognize that a site will not be operable for that growing season. So those two things do go hand in hand. Additionally, staff has recognized that during annual inspections, some of these locations are abandoned. And with that, we are requesting potentially that reclamation bonds be put in place. That way, the site can be restored to its original state at the end of the cultivation activities, regardless of whether the use permit has gone through its extended life period of 10 years. So with that, we do think that that would be a protective measure to return the properties back to their original state prior to use permit issuance. An additional effort is the method for calculating cannabis canopy. The Community Development Department calculates canopy on how it's proposed by our applicants. We have some applicants that propose canopy and cultivation as the same area, cultivation as a larger area with canopy proposed inside of that area, canopy as a designated area on its own, and then canopy with rows and aisles. So with that, we're looking to align and have a streamlined effect of how canopy will be proposed and approved based on one calculating method. And that concludes the upcoming topics for the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
So then our next steps, if I could pick up where Mary left off, this list of topics to consider is slightly fluid because we also do encourage public input, and there are some questions that'll come from the public that are going to be considered by the task force. The next steps after that, we will visit the Board of Supervisors just to give them the similar update to what you have received today. Our goal was to have a draft ordinance ready by the end of the year, but that's not going to happen. However, before our two outgoing supervisors leave, we wanted them to be able to have some comments and recommendations. After that, we will start the drafting of the ordinance, which will be robust and comprehensive. And that draft document will then get its review again. So you will see these again, in addition to the topics left for the task force to cover. It will go through review of the Agriculture Advisory Committee, also the then back to you with the Planning Commission and a notice public hearing, as well as in the board for a notice public hearing. 2, because it's an ordinance, or no, 1 public hearing, and the second is for possible adoption. So we anticipate that that will take a good chunk of next year, just because we're integrating it in with Lake County 2050 activities and all of our current planning projects as well. So, but we did want you to just have an update to see they have been working steadily, and we definitely appreciate the dedication of the task force members.
Yeah, and I did watch that meeting where you guys had decided to collectively sit down, make them longer and more frequent to chunk away at the task ahead of you.
The meetings have gone from 90 minutes to 3 hours.
Sure.
And they, instead of every other week, they will be every week. And this week it is on Friday and then again on Monday.
Oh.
So they really want to get through this. We all see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we need to make sure whenever you're doing recommendations on policy development that you take the time that you really need to take and not rush through it.
Right.
So that's what we're going to do.
Well, thank you, and thank you, staff. Is there any, obviously, if there's any further discussion, there's no decision-making or anything like that. You guys have any questions or anything, or directions you want to give staff until you guys see them again at all? No?
Yeah, I have a few questions. Well, they kind of came up as we were kind of going through these items. One is regarding whenever we do the annual review for each project. From the ones that have been done in the past, have we seen, what are the main types of, for example, complaints as a chunk that are received by neighbors or the public in regards to these projects that we're approving? I want to ask that question because, you know, we do get like maybe 10 people from the same, area, and the setbacks that are in the ordinance might not be enough. If, for example, if there's complaints about odor or lights or anything like that.
I'll defer to our staff who are hearing those complaints every day.
That's a good question, Commissioner Chavez.
We were going to say the same thing. Odor and operational hours are the main complaints that we receive.
Okay.
And for example, for the ones that have been reviewed, how have those been mitigated or resolved, or is that just between the applicant and the public?
So within the project's approved property management plan, there is a section on odor, and there is a community liaison that's listed. With that, we do provide that contact information to the complaining party. However, we also follow up on these issues. It's rare, but sometimes we do find farms operating out of compliance based on an odor mitigation issue, and to that, we've done an immediate abatement.
Okay. And then another question. From the projects that have been reviewed, how close do the hydrology reports compare to the actual water usage? Is it fairly close, under, or over?
So with that was under the designation of the former cannabis program manager, so I can't speak to that. But what I can speak on behalf of is the program as it stands now. And we have been identifying some sites that do have issues with their projected water use. However, we are seeing that it is under the projected water use because they're reducing their square footage or they're opting out.
Yeah, that was kind of what it was going to be a follow-up question. If they weren't meeting, or if they were using, or if they didn't have sufficient water, what
Are they
actions
reducing?
be taken? Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you.
So I had a question. You mentioned a bond for if the project was either abandoned or they closed the permit. Can you elaborate a little more on that? How much is the bond? How is that decided? What are the parameters, or is that still to be worked out?
So that is going to be discussed with the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force, and the parameters of that have not yet been discussed.
And is that slated for anytime soon?
Yes, we have a meeting tomorrow, and then we
Right.
have a meeting on Monday as well. So all of the staff recommendations that were the second portion that I had read to you and gone into discussion with. Those are all items that will be discussed with the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force soon.
On these next two meetings, during these next two meetings?
Well, it really depends on how far the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force can get with the topic items and the discussion that's brought forward.
Sure, okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Brown, any questions or concerns?
No, I think the only question I had really in terms of trying to mitigate any complaints from neighbors, what type of process is actually in place other than good faith? Is there records being kept by so there is records being kept if there's a complaint comes into the applicant and they're keeping track of who's complaining before it gets to the county?
Yes.
Okay.
So with that being said, all of the complaints that come into the Code Enforcement Division for permitted sites are forwarded to the Planning Division. The Planning Division will review the complaint, reach out to the permittee, request a response, and all of this documentation is added to the administrative record for the project. So this will be a collective example of the 10 years of the life of the use permit and any issue that has been compiled during that time within the administrative record.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't think we have any further questions or clarification for staff. So with that, Director Turner, did you kind of cover all of your non-timed items in your department update?
No.
Do we have public comment for this discussion?
It would be appropriate.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. We'll take this time right now to go ahead and open public comment. Feel free to approach the podium. Tell us your first and last name. We'll give you three minutes, maybe a little bit more if you need it. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Margot Kambara. I am a Lake County resident, property owner, and registered voter. Thank you for your service to the community. Like you, I'm a volunteer. One of my volunteer activities is attending the county's Cannabis Ordinance Task Force. My objective is to help draft a cannabis ordinance that works for the community and the cannabis industry. Information is an important tool for the Planning Commission. On your agenda today is an informational item on the Cannabis Task Force progress. For the record, there is information in the summary on a Cannabis Task Force recommendation that has not been approved by the task force. The recommendation summary on the public land setback does not accurately describe the motion proposed and passed by the task force. Similarly, the summary describes a change to public lands setback ordinance number 3096 that the task force did not approve. Tomorrow, the task force meets. On its agenda is approval of the minutes summarizing the recommendation on public land setback approved by the task force at its meeting last week. In the future, when the Planning Commission is asked to act on recommendations from the task force, please act on the correct and approved version of documents from the task force. Please be mindful of public comment about document errors in matters brought before you. In February this year, an incorrect version of a table of recommendations on zoning districts and permit types for various cannabis-related businesses from the task force was presented to the Board of Supervisors and I believe to the Planning Commission. Although members of the public pointed out the error to the Board of Supervisors, the correct version of the table was not provided to the board. The Cannabis Task Force has committed many hours to improve the county's cannabis ordinance. If the county values the task force expertise, the county should value the task force approved recommendations. Thank you for your consideration, and thank you again for your service to the community.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Appreciate your comment. Anybody else like to speak? Absolutely. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners, Madam Chair. Yeah, this will be brief. It's along the same things that she was referring to.
Sure, just don't forget to state your first and last
Oh,
name,
yeah.
please.
What am I called today? Tom Lasik is my name.
Thank you, Tom.
We're a resident in your district, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
So, we know this is just informational, and that's good. The first thing I want to point out is that I'm actually quite impressed with a lot of the changes that the CDD and the Cannabis Task Force have put forth. I think in summary, in aggregate, it's actually a better ordinance than what we're currently having to deal with. But we do have concerns, and mostly that some of the stuff that, particularly the stuff from last week, which was about public lands. To the task force credit, there was an effort to essentially weaken the protections to public lands. And the task force, to its credit, said no. We want to keep those public lands as they are. And also to its credit, it decided to actually further protections by introducing language or recommending language for the Clear Lake protections. So that's all good. But there was on I think it's page 16 of the table, there was a strike through of existing language, which is concerning for a lot of us because it weakens the protections to our state and county parks. So that's one of the things that was not discussed and not approved by the task force. And is specifically, it's just one word, but that word's important because when 3096 was first discussed in August by Supervisor Sabatier, introduced it, and the discussions between De Leon and Supervisor Brown were a lot of discussion around the BLM lands and forest lands. And so the first part of that ordinance speaks to that. And the second part of the ordinance was providing essentially strong protections for our state and county parks. They didn't have to justify their existence or anything like that. And so they're kept separate, and the language as it's currently written does that. By striking through the word additionally, it kind of kludges it together, and that's a great concern to a lot of the public because we really like our parks. I drive through one all the time. I've hiked the Canocti many times. So we just ask that, we know this is not a voting thing, but there are things in there that have not been approved yet. We hope that tomorrow, when they discuss it, those corrections are made. So thanks for your time, and again, thanks for the CDD and the COTF for doing what they're doing.
And thank you for taking time on your Thursday to sit with us and share your knowledge and your information, both of you. Appreciate it. Ruby, do we have any hands in the Zoom room? We see you in the Zoom room. We will unmute you and give you permission to speak.
The name says user. You are now allowed to speak. You'll have 3 minutes.
User, are you able to speak? Have we unmuted them? You are unmuted if you want to try to speak to see if we can hear you. All right. They muted themselves? Okay. Well, we'll take that as a sign that you don't want us to wait for you. All right. Any other action in the Zoom room?
Maria, go ahead and please state your first and last name, and you're able to speak for 3 minutes.
Good morning, Maria. Are you able to speak?
It looks like she's trying to, but we're not hearing her.
It looks like you are trying to speak, but we are not able to hear you in the chambers. Maybe try your mic, Maria. Or are we muted?
Not able to hear her.
Yeah, we are unable to hear you, Maria. You can type in your question or your comment in the chat box if you'd like. We could try to read it for you. We'll give her a little bit of time. Any other hands that we can try to unmute? No?
Donna, go ahead and try and speak.
Are you trying? We're trying to have Donna speak right now. Might be on our end.
Yeah, I'm looking at, we're not getting anything.
Yes.
I'm hearing that chat is disabled.
Oh, chat might be disabled. That might help with being able to communicate. Thank you for sharing that.
I think chat is usually disabled
Oh, it is?
in the
Okay.
PC and board meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You want to try to unmute Donna or Maria again? Just want to make sure we try to give them an opportunity to communicate.
Well,
Oh, there's somebody. Try that again.
hello?
Yes. We can hear
Okay,
you.
so all the chat people or all the Zoom people can hear each other, but you can't hear us. So that's what's going on.
Okay.
This is Maria Khan. So I only was chiming in to say that Angela was trying to talk, but you couldn't hear her. So I'm going to let Angela, if she can hear, take over because I really didn't have any comments.
That sounds great.
Yay. it's
Thank
working.
you. Thank
Bye.
you for your patience.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Commissioners Angela Emerald. I just wanted to bring up the portion regarding on page 11 regarding tree removal. Just for your some background, there was a proposed oak revisions with a great presentation presented by Donna Makowitz from the Audubon Society. And as you guys can recall, there's been a lot of projects. There was one recently that it was approved to remove 42 mature oak trees. So the oak tree, the revisions proposed by the Audubon was heavily supported by the public. We feel that waiting 3 years for the general plan update is too long. So just wanted to make you guys aware of that it was quite supported by the general public that attends these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right. Anybody else you would like to unmute with their hand raised?
I don't know if Maria wanted to say something or if she
She said no.
All right. If anybody else wishes to speak, if you can raise your hand in the Zoom room, we will give you an opportunity. All right. Looks.
She doesn't have her hand raised.
Her hand isn't raised. Donna, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand. All right. Well, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I would just like to clarify one thing raised by Tom and Margot. Ooh, pardon me. Thank you for bringing that up. I just wanted to clarify on page 15, the strike through of the word additionally was just a grammatical thing because we ended up adding an additionally after that. So we did not remove the provision for all state and county parks or public lands, but I thank them for pointing that out because we'll go ahead and just make sure that that language reads maybe more clearly, but just wanted to state that for the record that we didn't remove that, but we will go ahead and take a look at that language.
Thank you.
Tom Lace again, thank you. Yeah, I think the way it's currently worded, it could be improved. You know, we just want to make sure that it's transparent and that the spirit and intent of what the board and what Commissioner De Leon is clear. So it can be reworded. I'm happy to work with anyone to offer suggestions to make sure that's where it needs to be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I will officially close public comment, and thank you everyone for taking the time today and giving us your feedback and your concerns. Is there any other conclusional statements for staff before we let them go? No? Okay, Director Turner, department update and untimed items.
There are no non-timed items for the commission today. For the department update, I just wanted to let you know that our wonderful principal planner, Michelle Iris, has accepted the position of resource planner.
But here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the rule. She couldn't leave.
Okay.
So we do have a posting available for a principal planner. If anyone happens to know an experienced planner who's also a strong team leader with a supportive management style and is solution oriented, and to be like Michelle as much as possible. So very positive, good communication skills. You know, I'm just looking for the top tier stuff if I can. Please feel free to direct them to our job opportunity page on the county's website.
Copy.
Next, we have an update from code enforcement that I was hoping Sam would help me with. We have some really, really good news of an amazing accomplishment that our code enforcement staff have done this week. Sam.
What is it?
Sam has been training our staff on drones, how to operate the drones. And so it's an actual real training. You don't just go out and play with them. You have to work with the FCC, is that it? FAA? FCC. Yeah, because you have to, FAA, to learn all the regulations and then take a test on those regulations. So because I already messed up the acronyms, I have too many acronyms in my head today, I was hoping Sam would come and give the accurate details on this really great accomplishment for our staff.
Don't put me on the spot.
Because we're really proud. I'm totally putting you on the spot.
That's exciting.
No, they have an amazing team. I don't know if any of you saw some of the, I bought them some little drones so that they could play with them in the room. But and that sort of gave me an idea of what levels we were talking about, because there's a lot, it's not like gaming. And it can be very dangerous, actually. I have scars to prove it. So, but watching these officers learn there's first the mechanical skills, the kinetic skills, but then they have to practice safety skills. And the other thing is they were learning them, and they were evolving so quickly that it was just a joy to see. And then we started adding because you basically have to get a pilot's license without instrument training. And that's what they were learning to do. And so to watch them begin with these little things in here with obstacle courses, I don't know if you remember, but there were branches. I had everything that we could, that would
a makeshift course.
And it was an obstacle course in this room, so taking them from there and then taking them out, and we didn't have drones that we could use out in public other than mine, so I was letting them use my drones, and you never know what could happen. And these guys, they were so respectful, they worked so well together as a team, and then they were just exemplifying the regulations. They would comment on each other. Well, that's that regulation. This is this regulation. And then the other thing is they had to start going out of their comfort zone, because I was having them go over go through obstacles, around obstacles, and then to take a drone 400 feet in the air, or to take it out a half mile and then bring it back. And watching them evolve was just a joy. And it was so encouraging. And so I was so impressed with your staff. I got to just say, it was just remarkable. And they were so supportive of each other. Oh yeah, you need to learn this. Oh yeah, well, let me help you with this. And they just did this. I mean, and this was not something that was a short-term experience for them. This went over, 3 months? I mean, it was a long time, and sometimes they couldn't fly and because of weather or whatever. And so they had to relearn those skills, which is exactly what you want them to do. It was just a joy, I just have to say. And they all passed their FAA Part 107 exam. So now they are actually certified pilots. And they're not that far away that they could go for instrument training. So this gave them a really solid foundation. And I was just so proud, but I'm so proud of your department for the way that they just encouraged each other. They worked together, they learned together, and they practiced together, and they all passed. I mean, that is like so successful. And it's not easy to pass a Part 107 exam. So to watch them do this, so anyway, I've rambled long enough, but you should be very, very proud of your code enforcement officers.
Well, cool. And thank you for taking them under your wing and showing them and instructing them all the things. A good team effort. So, yeah, I think you enjoyed yourself a little as well, teaching them and showing them. So thank you for that. And I'm sure that the drones themselves are going to be very useful in different departments and just having that as a tool in our toolkit.
Exactly.
So that's neat. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
I have more.
Cool.
I just wanted to give you a Lake County 2050 project update. We are at the last week of what I've been considering LAPAC season. I was going to count all the meetings, virtual and in-person meetings that we've had in the last 3 weeks, but I thought it might make me cry. So suffice it to say that we've had a number of meetings, both virtual and in person. We're finishing up strong with evening meetings in person in each LAPAC area this week. And I wanted to extend just my appreciation, one, to Sam. He and I were here in the in-person Lakeport meeting last night till 7. And then he's back here early in the morning, chipper and happy, which I'm getting there with my coffee, but yeah. So, but just the support from Sam and from the staff and members of the public and the GPAC. We've had, like, Margot has been attending a number of meetings. Paul Duncan from CAL FIRE has been attending a number of meetings. We've had just significant, dedicated focus to gathering as much input as possible, and it's been awesome. We had just like as far as conversations with tribes, just thinking about the talk that I had with Vice Chair Beltran at the COI meeting, it's like still giving me goosebumps because it was just this really great opportunity. We started talking about the general plan update, but then we actually started talking about a lot more stuff. And it was wonderful. Just the public that is coming out, the people who are trusting us enough to give us their time and tell us what they think is significant and so rewarding. So I'm very hopeful that as we pivot from public input gathering to actually drafting the documents, we will end up with draft documents that are clearly community vision driven. So we'll finish up our public input this week. We have a little bit of next week. And then we switch over to writing those draft documents, which we will have available for public review in the springtime, so May, late spring. And that's when I'm going to reach out again, and hopefully the people who have been so helpful this time, public and appointed people, will still remember and be willing to come back and take a look at the draft documents, then see what we missed, what we got wrong, anything that has occurred to people since the end of this public input period. So we'll hopefully everyone will still hang in there because next year we'll also have the environmental analysis process, and we could definitely use public input on that as well. It'll be a full EIR. It'll take all of 2025 to work on, and we will rely on public input because we need to get to the end where we have a draft update that is a community vision driven document. So it's a once in a lifetime career opportunity actually to be part of this process, and I'm just really thankful for everybody that's given us their time.
Yeah. And it's exciting to see all the pieces kind of probably coming together and getting to decipher. And yeah, I don't, maybe we're just nerdy like that, but I think it's cool too.
Yeah.
So that's neat. That's cool. Good to know.
And that concludes my department update.
Well, thank you. And just a shout out to the public if you do have time to participate in your updates or getting involved in your town halls or your GPACs, or even just staying aware of what's coming up with the plan is good to know.
And you can find our latest and greatest on lakecounty2050.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Turner. Thank you, staff and everybody out there in the public. We will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 10:16.